as players have been spending their time building their new UI, as they try the new content with the new add-ons they have to make do because of what they have just lost in this pre-patch, one thing has been sticking out like a sore thumb, because in some ways you might have found some halfway decent, possibly acceptable replacements, things like Platinator, things like ArcUI, maybe Dunder's frames, maybe NefUI, some add-ons are returning, so you can still use them just fine, like Details, like Bartender, like Opie, that might or might not still somewhat resemble what you were using before, with some functionalities, removed of course, but they might kind of pass for doing the job. However, there is one thing that to players is still sticking out for being not even remotely as acceptable as the rest of your UI, and these are your party and your raid frames. That's because while most of the other add-ons are more concerned with styling the bars or styling the icons, the size and the shape of your buttons, which can be done for most of the add-ons right now, what you would also have to have as an extra to your party or your raid frames is combat-related information, things like buffs and debuffs on your frames. Obviously, it already is somewhat of an annoyance when it comes to your nameplates. You will have noticed it more if you're a dot-based class or you happen to have a bunch of different debuffs you put on the enemies, that you get to see all of these annoying ones pop up in nameplates without having the option to choose which ones you want to see. But it will get obviously way more oppressive when you have to try to make it work in your raid or party frames. And this circles back to the problem of secrets. Right now, even if you try to bypass the default Blizzard frames, you try to use something that used to do this job just fine, like Grid. Even now, Grid is having problems showing, even starting from simple things, but also being able to actually show all of your buffs. As you see here now, as an evoker, for example, you don't even get to show your Dream Breath on players or the reversion if it came from Echo, but only the original reversion you created. And if you choose to only show the essential buffs on your screen, all you see is just Echo and nothing else. And then when it comes to debuffs, you would have the same problem, the fact that you don't get to choose which of the debuffs you want to see on each of your frames. Now, this is of course a much deeper problem we are into right now, that players kind of want to have this fixed by the time the season actually comes out. Yes, it's a while, it's almost 2 months actually, since the 17th of March, which is when Heroic and Normal raids come out, and then the 24th, which is practically exactly 2 months from now, almost, is when Mythic Plus season opens. So we still have a couple of months before March, before end of March, when this actually will matter way more. But the issue has been the same ever since we started thinking about this. Hold on a second, if Blizzard hides every single spell in the game into a box of secrets, so that when add-ons are trying to pick up the spells, they can't pick them up because they're all secreted. You don't know what you're picking up because it's blank. You can't see what you're picking up. This was done in an attempt for Blizzard to start, for example, hiding from players mechanics of bosses, mechanics of trash mobs. All the spells they were casting, now they are secret, so you can't put a cooldown of the spells of trash mobs like you could right now, or I guess until a few days ago in live. You can't have, of course, things like weak auras or more detailed DBM or bigwigs features. You also can't have things like Omni CD. You couldn't have all of your suite of cooldowns and defensives and offensive abilities, even the interrupt trackers, because now the add-ons cannot see those abilities anymore. If you try to go and pick up an interrupt, a spell ID for an interrupt, the answer comes back blank. You can't see it, so you don't know who has which interrupt available. And obviously this has always made people a bit confused, because they were like, okay, fine, Blizzard doesn't want to have this level of complexity constantly rising, this tug of war between the developer of the mechanics versus the developer of the add-ons that are trying to solve these mechanics. So we are taking away many of their tools, much of their power in what they can do with add-ons. And that's where players wonder, hold on a second, what does that have to do with me choosing what do I want to show on my frames, for example? If I want to show my rejuvenation hot and my regrowth hot, or if I only want to show my rejuvenation, How does that make the encounter easier? Why do we need to have this option from us taken away? The answer is that for now, obviously, the only solution Blizzard has used to limit the ability for add-ons to be able to parse all of the enemy mechanics and not have things like weak auras solve them like they have been up to now is an all or nothing solution, where you put all of the abilities into a box of secrets that they cannot be read. So both the big abilities, things that, for example, you use to track, like big cooldowns, defensive and offensive cooldowns, things like the interrupts for the interrupt tracker, as well as all of the enemy spells. So, at the moment, this has been very traumatic for many healers especially. I'm sure there will be some triple-digit IQ, at least DPS players who still make use of party frames for some things, checking out the cooldowns, the state of other players' cooldowns, for example, in their Mythic Plus keys and whatnot. But the biggest hurt, of course, has gone to healers who are now trying to orientate themselves around the spec without having, in some cases, the ability to see as clearly as before very important tools, whether it is your spread of atonements as a discipline priest, or your spread of echoes as a preservation evoker, or rejuvenations for resto druid. And right now, the current easiest solution is for this to be made manually, for these exceptions to be picked up manually by Blizzard. This is something that we have seen a few weeks ago. They already done for a few mechanics that have allowed to be styled by add-ons. They whitelisted, for example, Maelstrom power, Maelstrom weapon stacks. For Enhancement Shaman, they whitelisted the stacks for your Devourer, for your Metamorphosis, Void Metamorphosis stacks, and at the moment that would be the only solution. We have seen many players, many comments online pointing out to things like, oh, please, Blizzard, let us filter our debuffs, let us choose where to put or where to show our debuffs or our buffs in our frames. But this cannot be done as a blanket choice. They can't allow you to position and show all of the debuffs, because that means then you can parse all of those debuffs, all of those mechanics in other add-ons, like weak auras, for example, or a pseudo follow-up of a weak aura, which can then go and start shaping that mechanic in whichever way you want. Same goes for buffs. If Blizzard just simply opens the gates and allows you to simply filter all of the buffs and procs and whatever you want, then you can have Omni CD back. You can start tracking all of the externals, offensive, defensive abilities and interrupt trackers again. So the only solution is for this for now to be precisely targeted. Things like, if you have Druid as an example, keep the interrupt a secret, keep big cooldowns a secret. None of that can be tracked, but take away from the secrets, make it visible for all of the add-ons, things like Reju, things like Regrowth, things like Life Bloom, and things like Wild Growth. So now suddenly all of the HOTS of Resto Druids are free. You can now pick and shape them the way you want. These are not particularly major for other players. Most other players won't really care about having access to those HOTS on a Resto Druid. They want to make it in a Omni CD tracker of those buttons. Same if you pick Preservation Evoker and you let Echo, Reversion, the echoed version of Reversion, Dream Breath, the echoed version of Dream Breath, and Lifebind, all no longer secrets. So now all of these buffs or HOTS can be styled how you want in the frames. This seems right now the only feasible solution within the 2 months we have left before the release of the actual first season of Midnight, or a bit over a month we have left before the release of the actual expansion. Starting from the assumption that, of course, Blizzard will want to keep all of these abilities, or as many abilities as possible, as a secret, unable to be tracked by add-ons, we need to have concessions on some of them, especially to ease the problem for healers. And even when it comes to debuffs, it is one thing to keep secrets, key mechanics of encounters, so they cannot be taken by other add-ons and styled by other add-ons, like having all of these warnings, all of these go to cross, go to mark, auto mark players based on the ability, because now the ability is no longer secret, so you can know when it's being cast, the players it is targeting, etc, etc. If they are key mechanics, you can keep them secret, like, you know, the players being targeted by the claws on Nexus King, for example, or the players being targeted by the orbs as well on Nexus King. That can still be a secret. But what about the debuff, the base debuff of you having to be inside of the soak 3 times on Nexus King? That's gonna be a debuff that is gonna stay on every single player's frame for the entire encounter until you remove it. It's gonna clutter 20 players' frame with this debuff for no reason. That's not that necessary to know. You don't really need to have it show up on all the frames. You would like to remove it, and even if you were to make this no longer a secret, this particular debuff no longer a secret, it wouldn't really be abused by addons. There isn't really nothing something like a Wikora could have done to treat this mechanic and simplify this mechanic if it could see this button. The same could be said about the Immolation Aura raid wide dot. The entire raid suffers during Soul Hunters. There are different mechanics you might have wanted Wikoras for in Soul Hunters, but that mechanic, it's a debuff that shows up in the entire raid for every player, and it's just a dot. It does nothing other than doing damage over time, and it still takes a slot in your debuffs. That's another example of an ability that could be taken away from the secrets, so that if you want to, you can just get rid of it, because it's just a permanent dot that's gonna stay there for the entire fight. You don't really need to see it. That at the moment is the most sensible solution we are waiting for from Blizzard, to have some sense of clarity and some sense of cleanliness to our frames, party and raid frames, before the expansion actually comes out. We need some help when it comes to healers. Right now their visual load when it comes to frames is quite cluttered. They don't really have a lot of control over what they want to see and what they want to show in their frames. So this would be a very good step. We have seen Blizzard manually whitelist some features already, so we need more. We need more whitelisted features, whether they are key buffs or key hots of healers, as well as the least important and the least relevant debuffs or dots mechanics from bosses, or just even trash mobs, mythic plus bosses, etc, etc, being able to be whitelisted so addons can pick them up, and now you can choose to either show them or not, in order to reduce the clutter we are currently going to have in our frames if we have no option in whether we want to either show everything or show nothing, which right now is the problem. This is what we had to highlight for today, the complaint of the state of our frames. While some other addons can almost pass for being a somewhat decent replacement of our older addons no longer working, where we are still stuck quite far back for now are these frames, and the ability for us to customize the frames beyond just the shape and the size. The actual information that goes inside of the frames right now, there isn't enough. We don't have enough tools to actually shape these things. So that's what we hope we will see between now and the release of the expansion, but even more so between now and the release of the actual season, the first season of Midnight. We will see how many, if any at all, improvements we are going to get on this end, on our frames, and for now we can just, I guess, observe and also hope a little bit that things will improve in the future. But for today, on this Friday, we are done. It is now time to leave each other. We are starting our goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who have been supporting Competitive for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, I love it. I love these deliveries coming in at 10 in the morning. Who is awake at 10 in the morning?